My name is Kim Porter. I'm the Executive Director of Be a Part of the Conversation. I want to thank Montgomery County Office of Drug and Alcohol for asking us to bring you this topic tonight. I think it's very relevant. We were just having a little discussion, panelists and myself. So I'm really glad that you're joining us to talk about something that's so important, especially with regard to women in 2023. You are welcome to submit any questions during this program, and then I will keep an eye on. I'll be kind of moderating later when we get to Q&A. So we'll get to your questions that you might have. I think a few of you did submit some questions ahead of time. Thank you for doing that. Also, we are recording this program, but rest assured that if you unmute and ask a question later on, we're going to ask you to stay muted for now. But later, if you want to ask a question yourselves, that's great. We encourage that. But I will make sure that your image, your video, your name will not be seen in the recording. So anything personal that you ask will not be in the recording. We will do our very best to make sure that everybody's privacy is respected here. And there is a follow-up page on this topic. It is conversation.zone/alcohol. So you're welcome to visit that after we get this recording posted. And there's a lot of resources on that page as well. At the end of this program, a survey will pop up. I would encourage you to take that for our benefit, especially because we really like to hear from you about if this was helpful or not, what other kinds of topics you might like to hear about in the future, and just any feedback that you might have. We'd love to hear from you. In a little while, I'll introduce you to our panelists, our presenters. Liv Hauser is with us. She's a clinician with Ethos Treatment. And we also have Megan, who's a person in recovery from alcohol use disorder, and she's going to be sharing her personal story. I'm going to give you a little bit of foundational information first. I also want to tell you that we have some programs coming up that you might be interested in. One coming up that I really love talking about stigma, because we need to talk about stigma. I think that having Megan with us is a perfect example of how we can reduce stigma by humanizing all this research I'm going to share with you at the beginning. You know we can do all the epidemiology on human lives, but we need to hear the humanity. We need to hear the actual stories. And so stigma is something that is a barrier for so many people, even acknowledging that they have a challenging relationship with alcohol or other drugs, and then seeking treatment and so forth. So we want to chip away at that stigma in any way that we can. So we'll be talking about that on Zoom on January 9th. Also, another program that might be interesting to this group, we have lots of programs coming up, but this one is a bit more in the prevention world, because we're partnering with the school district to talk about vaping. Vaping could be nicotine, it could be cannabis, and it's really become a challenge with young people because young people were not smoking cigarettes, the old-fashioned tobacco, combustible cigarettes, but they sure are vaping. And it's quite complex when you're talking about, is it nicotine? Is it THC? What's going on here? So we will be unpacking that on January 17th. And again, that is on Zoom as well. We do some programs in person. I love those opportunities, but you can find those programs and others on our calendar on our website. And also we have a YouTube channel that has a tremendous amount of content. We have more than 130 programs like this one that are recorded that you can scroll through and see if there's anything that you find interesting and check it out on your own time. I also will like to make sure that you know about support group meetings. So I'm the parent of somebody in recovery. That's how I got into this work 12, 13 years ago. And I'm very grateful that my son is sober today. But I needed other parents. I needed to really be in a room with others. It's that same idea of the reason AA is so successful, and other 12-step programs, one alcoholic talking to another. Same with us parent folks, our parents and guardians and grandparents. We have Al-Anon and Nar-Anon meetings. Those are 12-step. Parent partnership are not meant to replace those. It's a supplement. It's an alternative, perhaps. We have 21 meetings happening currently every 5 days of the week, every week of the year. And you can find them on our website. Parent partnership is right here. You can see all the purple buttons on this calendar are in person, and the green buttons are meetings that take place on Zoom. So you can click one of those, and this is an in-person meeting that has the location, and maybe there's a topic and that sort of thing. If it's a Zoom meeting, then either the link will be there or someone's email who you can write to for the link. But these are all free to attend. And they, as I said, they happen throughout the region in person or virtually. And it doesn't matter where in the country you are, you're welcome to join us. We also have a 3-part peer-led family recovery course, also free to attend. This is capped at 12 participants. This has been incredibly, I don't know, I don't even have words for it because it's been so powerful. And I've instructed a few of these. We have 18 instructors who are peers like me, who've been trained and have learned some really great skills to work with family members. They have curriculum that they present, and it's really a tremendous program. I encourage you to check it out if you haven't had any kind of education around your loved one's substance use, how it's affected you as a family member. These courses are focused, I have to say, on parents and guardians. We hope someday to have like the spousal relationship represented, but for now we're focusing because most of our peers that work with us are parents like myself. So again, hope you'll check that out. I'll put all these links in the chat in a little while when I'm finished with some slides. So I'm going to dive into this topic. And, women in alcohol, well, alcohol in general has been obviously around since berries fell off bushes and fermented. We've had probably alcohol use disorder the same amount of time, right? And we have had it glamorized, glorified, validated, feel very reinforced in our consumption of it when we see how healthful, skinny girl, yeah, all this stuff kind of promoting the well-being of people consuming alcohol and how fun it is and all of that. And so, how can we, oh, and this one cracks me up, right? These are flasks that look like tampons. I guess this might be for somebody who's under 21, right? Because why else would we need to be deceitful about our alcohol use? And just, historically throughout our history, the wine culture, and I know Liv's going to talk about this, but, here's some images that I found on Etsy. It's like decor, right? We decorate our homes in wine, alcohol, mommy juice, right? This one blows my mind. Wine pairings for Girl Scout cookies. No, sorry, can't support that. So the reason I'm showing you, I'm getting into opioids here just briefly, is that we talk so much about this, as we should. The mortality associated with opioid use disorder and addiction to opioids is horrific, and certainly it merits our attention. But I just want to contrast the numbers from 2020, just a few years ago, of the deaths due to opioid overdose as compared to deaths due to alcohol-related disease. So you can see that actually more people are dying from alcohol-related disease. This does not even include car crashes, things like that, people who have taken their own lives, things of that nature under the influence of alcohol. This is alcohol-related disease, which I'll talk more about in a moment. But because it doesn't have as quicker progression to mortality, it takes a longer time to progress, perhaps, to some of these diseases that we don't talk about it nearly as much, but we absolutely need to. So just to understand what we're talking about when we say alcohol use disorder, also known as alcoholism, it's something that is like any other substance use disorder. It's continued use despite negative consequences. We continue to use even though some negative things have happened in our lives. So drinking at an early age absolutely can elevate our risks. So if we start drinking before we're 15, we're more than 5 times as likely to develop an alcohol use disorder. And if we, rather than that, wait until we can delay that onset of use. So we do a lot of programs in the K through 12 community with parents to help them understand that serving alcohol underage is just never a good idea. So many people want to believe that they're going to teach their child to drink responsibly. It'll be safer if they do it at home. And all of these beliefs are just not founded in research at all. Unfortunately, it's just not a good idea. We talk a lot about that developing frontal cortex of our brain is not fully there, not fully developed until we're roughly 25 years of age. So if we start using alcohol under that age, even at a legal age of 21, we're at much greater risk until we're much more matured and have that wet cement of brain development more solidified. and puts us at much less risk of developing a problem. So as a parent, I would not want to be the one introducing my child to alcohol just because they're going to have ample opportunity to access it once they're 21, and there is no way to learn how to drink responsibly. In fact, drinking earlier in life will create more problems with us drinking irresponsibly. Sorry. Okay. Family history and genetics, this also plays a part regardless of age, so we know that roughly 60% of our risk for having any kind of substance use disorder is genetics. And so we look at the family tree and we see that can even be other process addictions, like someone addicted to gambling and other things. So looking at that, recognizing that I might be at risk, and especially if you look at things like mental health challenges, trauma, and so forth, naturally, these are going to also elevate our risk if we begin using alcohol to self-soothe, self-medicate, and so forth. So, how many people drink? A lot of us do. 18 and older, which is not the legal age, but this is the adult population, 85.6 reported drinking sometime in their lifetime. And actually slightly less than half reported drinking alcohol in the past month. So there is a bit of a myth that everybody drinks. Everybody does not drink. Some people, I do not have alcohol use disorder, but I do not consume alcohol any longer. I did for a number of years, but I don't anymore. And there are lots of adults who just choose not to, either never did or chose not to for health reasons, or perhaps seeing that they don't like the progression in their use. So not everybody drinks. Certainly many of us have tried it. But also just to kind of give you a little bit of a snapshot of first, what is considered a drink. And this varies depending on if it's male or female, but just body weight, body mass, things like that. But a drink is defined as 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, 1.5 ounces of liquor is considered one drink. So light drinking would be seen as like less than or equal to 3 drinks a week. I don't know that I would consider equal to 3 drinks a week. That's light drinking, right? So that's a good chunk of the population. And again, 33.7 did not drink in the past year. Moderate, 15.5%, and then heavy drinking considered for men, 14 or more drinks a week. For women, 7 or more drinks a week. That's about 5% of the population. So the Jelinek curve has been around for a very long time, and it applies to any kind of substance use progression. And the reason I bring it up with regard to alcohol use in particular is I think that progression is the challenge of alcohol. It's legal if you're over 21. As we've already discussed, it's definitely validated in our culture. It's pervasive. You cannot walk into a grocery store in Pennsylvania without being affronted with some big display, especially when the Eagles are playing or it's the holidays. It's just pervasive. And so being that it is there, it is legal if you're over 21, then it's something that might be used moderately in the early years or so of use. And then life happens. I lost my job. My relationship fell apart. I had some trauma. I'm dealing with whatever the stressors are of life. There's so many. Then the alcohol is right there. It's so accessible. It's again so validated. So the progression picks up, and then you can just see that the spiral, and then the return to use is quite frequent as well. We know that people often will either engage in a 12-step program or inpatient or outpatient treatment, but then when not being tended to, might return to use because it's still there. They're still feeling the cravings. There are some medications that I'll touch on a little bit that can help with cravings, but just wanted to kind of just mention this idea of progression. I think is very relevant to alcohol use. The DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, has a set of criteria for diagnosing someone with alcohol use disorder. And this full handout is on that follow-up page of our website that I will share with you in the chat shortly. But you can kind of do a little self-assessment if you like, or kind of consider other folks' use that you might be concerned about. And there's been a lot of talk over the years about What it's good for you. Well, it actually turns out that it's not so good for you. I happen to be completely geeked out on Andrew Huberman. If anybody listens to the Huberman Lab podcast, they're amazing. He's a scientist, he's a neuroscientist at Stanford University. He has a great podcast, and his episode on alcohol is fascinating. And it's lengthy, as many of his are, but I promise you, it's quite interesting and worth a dive if you're at all curious to learn more about alcohol consumption in general. It's really quite interesting. So there, and again, on that follow-up page, I've shared this analysis that was looking at a meta-analysis of a number of different studies that have said that actually the negative aspects of alcohol use will far outweigh any potential benefits, and any benefits would be like very moderate use, or it's just complex. I'm not going to dive into it, but I just want you to know that it's it's not unusual for people to want to hang on to this hope that this is good for me, right? So what does alcohol do to our bodies? It can affect a lot of our very important organs, including our brain. Our heart can be impacted through arrhythmia, cardiomyopathy, stroke, and it can increase our blood pressure. Certainly, we know that it can affect our liver. Cirrhosis is something that we've all, I'm sure, heard about, but fatty liver, hepatitis, fibrosis, also the pancreas. Developing pancreatitis is very risky. There was a young woman who, in past years, presented with us as Megan is going to tonight, and in her story, she developed pancreatitis, and she was very close to losing her life because of the pancreatitis. And her physician told her that if she drank even one more time, she would probably die. So thank goodness she found recovery, and I believe has maintained her recovery all these years. And she was very young when she found sobriety and recovery. So this can happen even in early years, especially with heavy use. We can be put at much greater risk for certain cancers, head and neck, esophageal, liver, breast, and colorectal. And just a special note about this with regard, again, to women, which is our focus tonight, we are at, even with one drink per day, we have a 5 to 9 increased chance of developing breast cancer than women who don't drink at all. And that risk increases for every additional drink that women have per day. The immune system, we all think a lot more about our immune systems, I think, now that we've lived through COVID. So we want a healthy immune system, and alcohol can compromise this, especially drinking frequently. And hormones, this is certainly something that impacts women, right? So it could affect our mood, libido, sexual activity, menstrual cycles. That ship has sailed for me, but yes, for some of you, it might be a concern, right? In other ways that it affects our body, hepatitis, anxiety, dementia, depression, digestive issues, fibrosis, hearing loss. Again, we mentioned before, high blood pressure and STDs. All the things that can happen that are negative, unfortunately, when we stop drinking, we can recover a lot of these things. We can heal ourselves. We can have better health, even reducing use if it's become problematic, even reducing use. So benefits of stopping, you can see the list here. I'm not going to read it off to you, but they are many and important, I believe. And because, again, we're focusing on women, I want to touch on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. There is no known safe amount of alcohol consumption for women who are pregnant or might become pregnant. If fetal alcohol syndrome disorders, can impact children's physical, cognitive, and behavioral health. Any of these can become part of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So very important to understand this and avoid alcohol, even if considering pregnancy. About 1 in 7, about 14% of pregnant women reported currently drinking in the past 30 days. 5% of pregnant women reported binge drinking in the past 30 days. So obviously the message hasn't gotten out there quite enough yet. It could be that these folks are already really seriously craving alcohol before they became pregnant, and it is a challenge, and our hearts go out to them, but it is so important that they find a way to abstain, particularly during pregnancy. So looking at, the obvious differences, with regard to body mass and so forth regarding men versus women, alcohol does impact more men's health than it does women's, but 2 decades of data from the Centers for Disease Control show that women's alcohol rate mortality is rising at a faster rate than it is for men. Also, there was a study done by JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, showing that over a 20-year period, that alcohol-related mortality rates increased by a greater percentage for women than it did for men. So we are at much greater risk, unfortunately, of that escalated use. Compared to men, we start having those problems sooner and at lower drinking amounts, as we talked about earlier. Alcohol kind of sits in our body water, in our fluid in our bodies, and so we have less water in our bodies than men do. So it's going to be a higher concentration. This means that after a woman and a man of the same weight drink the same amount of alcohol, the woman's blood alcohol concentration will be higher and puts us at greater risk for harm. So also more likely to experience hangovers, alcohol-induced blackouts, and so forth. And finally, larger increases in alcohol-related emergency department visits and deaths in the past 20 years. Again, looking at those differences. All these studies are available on that follow-up page, by the way. There are ways to treat alcohol use disorder. There are medications that help with craving. These have been proven to reduce risk of relapse or return to use. Naltrexone is one of those. I may have heard of Vivitrol, which is an injection. There's also an oral that's used. Both are called naltrexone. That's the generic name. Acamprosate and disulfiram are also other medications. These would be Camprol and Antabuse. So these are other medications that can be used for helping to reduce those cravings. Also, of course, we're going to hear from an outpatient treatment provider in just a little while. So talk therapy can be incredibly helpful, especially looking at what put us at risk for seeking out something like alcohol to feel better in the first place, right? But in lots of opportunities for interventions and other reinforcements, and there are also, of course, inpatient programs, and also, of course, our tried and true 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, other mutual aid groups. There's Recovery Dharma, there's Smart Recovery. For the most part, these are very little, if no cost at all. There's ample and abundant programs, meetings, especially now that we have so many people on Zoom, that there are meetings pretty much around the clock, especially if you're willing to attend virtually. They're a layer of support, right? So please take care to make sure that if there is any underlying mental health challenge or trauma, that you seek professional help. But all of these are just ways of looking at layers of support. Also, a very, very important note about alcohol use. If alcohol use has progressed and it's being used in pretty high frequency and pretty high amounts, then this could be withdrawal from that could be life-threatening. The two substances that put us at risk for death when we're detoxing are alcohol and benzodiazepines. So while an opioid detox may be very, very, very uncomfortable and horrible to live through, it is not very likely that you will lose your life, but if you can have a lot of risk for seizures and other things. So withdrawal can look like anxiety, shaking hands, headache, nausea, vomiting, insomnia, sweating. It can be very, very unpleasant, but it can truly also be deadly. And just a quick note on how things have changed with COVID and looking at social media. These were taken during that period. Just grab them offline where there's so much, again, validating and this is what I need to feel better. And so it's really a shame that that isolation happened to so many of us, and it really moved the needle for a lot of people's alcohol consumption, and in particular for women. And you can see that alcohol consumption went up considerably, increased by 60% of those who were drinking. About 27% had no change in their consumption, and about a little less than 13% actually reduced their consumption. But this was an interesting study that was done by JAMA at the end, near the end of 2020. They were already getting the idea that there was a lot of shift in alcohol use, and so they ran this study, and 14% overall consumption increase. But this gray area down here is all looking at consumption by females. So women's consumption overall increased more than men. Heavy drinking among women increased by 41%, and alcohol-related problems among women increased by 39%. And there are a lot of different theories about how this might have affected us. Perhaps it was stress. Women were trying to do it all, as we do. I know Liv's going to talk to you more about this, but just that added pressure of working from home, parenting from home, all the things that were happening definitely carried with it a lot of negative feelings, a lot of anxiety and stress. But also there were some hypotheses that perhaps people were missing the party atmosphere, like the celebratory stuff. And so they were trying to kind of almost like recreate that at home and make it feel like a fun evening or something like that by including more alcohol in their lifestyle. So who knows why exactly? It could take us decades to figure out all the fallout of COVID, but it seems to definitely have impacted our consumption of alcohol. And, we'd be a part of the conversation, are harm reductionists, and we believe in looking at all pathways to recovery. And if reducing alcohol consumption is something that works for you, awesome. I know I hear those ads from Penn all the time looking for people who are interested in reducing or stopping their alcohol use. But there's also a really beautiful movement of people who are sober curious. There's a great interview with Tom Holland, who plays Spider-Man, and it's on oh God, what is his name? His last name is Shetty. He has a podcast, and it's this really great interview where he talks about his consumption of alcohol and what made him decide to abstain. He really hadn't hit any kind of bottom. He just did like a sober January or one of those kind of months and recognized that, wow, I'm obsessed with alcohol a lot more than I thought I'd be, and decided I'm going to give it another month, and was still thinking about it so much that he decided, I think I need to cut this out of my life. So, it's just interesting to kind of take a look at those, really kind of looking inward at our use, and maybe we want to kind of change the way we're consuming alcohol. So that is all that I have, and I am now very happy to introduce you to Liv Hauser. Liv is an outpatient clinician with Ethos Treatment. She enjoys working with families and couples who are struggling with substance use challenges wherever they are in their process to increase motivation, communication, and boundary setting necessary for a healthy family system. Been described as compassionate, empathetic, and supportive by her clients, her very lucky clients. So, and I'll introduce you to Megan in just a bit, but I'm going to now stop sharing and ask you to unmute. Liv, thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Liv Hauser. I am an outpatient clinician, as was just described. Currently right now, I have a young adult intensive outpatient program in the evenings that I run for Ethos. And then I also have a private practice where I work with a whole host of different individuals dealing with not just substance use, but mental health as well. So I have a pretty good idea, and I've had a lot of experience with working with women specifically, just in general. A lot of times, I'll see people with anxiety and depression, and they won't even address the alcoholism at first. A lot of times I've experienced people coming in and saying, or women coming in and saying, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm having panic attacks, or I'm having anxiety attacks, I don't feel understood. And they won't mention the alcohol, because a lot of times what I've noticed throughout my years of doing this is, as was just stated, societally, alcohol is looked at for women as a glamorized way of connecting. And in order to feel, it's pushed on women in order to feel safe in order to feel like they have people, in order to feel like they can be authentically themselves, just have a drink. Alcohol companies cater towards women with colors of alcohol, with different fruity drinks or drinks in pretty glasses, going along with that societal expectation that, you know, women have to look a certain way, have to appear a certain way, have to act a certain way. There's a lot of different roles that fit in with that. You can look at mothers. You can look at young women in general, trying to find their place in the world. And from an outside perspective, especially with the increase in social media, there is this picture of what a woman is supposed to look like, whether it be from a physical body image standpoint, or whether it be from a how they communicate with other people. There's all of these expectations attached to all of these roles with women. And alcohol has become this sense of community and sense of safety for women. What happens with that when a person is an alcoholic or dealing with alcoholism is their alcoholism starts telling them that this alcohol is the thing that is going to help me with everything. I'm stressed out, I have a drink. I get in a fight with somebody, I have a drink. I look in the mirror one day and I have a lot of insecurities and I don't like the way that I look. Therefore, I have a drink. And from its foundational core, addiction itself is when a want turns into a need. Initially, when people usually start using, they start using because of, there's a number of factors, but with women, what I've noticed the most is this feeling of, I want to be a part of. I want to feel like I can have confidence. I want to feel like I can fit in with another group of women and have a place in this world. And alcohol is there. And when you drink alcohol, your inhibitions lessen. A lot of people say that they become more outgoing, more bubbly, more giggly. They have more to talk about. They feel like they finally found their place, is what I've heard a lot from a lot of women that I've worked with that are in recovery or working towards recovery. When it comes to societal roles, I'm going to go on like the topic of motherhood for a second. Moms have all of these expectations of what it looks like to be, quote unquote, the perfect mom. If you think back to like the 50s, there were, you know, newspaper articles of the stereotypical woman being at home, vacuuming her floors and holding like 3 kids and making dinner at the same time. It sounds crazy if you think about it, because, you know, now it's like, oh my goodness, that should never have been a thing. But women still live in their head in that role a lot of times. I'm never doing enough. I go and I take my kids to school and I pick them up and I make sure the house is clean and I do the dishes and I do the laundry, and then they come home and then I take care of them afterwards and make sure that they're taken care of and fed. And by the end of the night, I need a glass of wine. Or I feel like my head is going to explode because I'm so overwhelmed, but I don't have anybody to talk to about it. Therefore, I will sit down and have a drink to decompress and relax. It started out as a want. At a certain point, it turns into a need. That amount of alcohol that was once first consumed that felt like enough, like 1 glass of wine, you build up a tolerance. That 1 glass of wine becomes 2 glasses of wine. The 2 glasses of wine becomes 3 glasses of wine. And then before you know it, in order to feel a sense of relief that you were feeling initially, you need to consume more and more and more and more alcohol until your body stops being able to function in general. That was talked about with, you know, cirrhosis of the liver, kidney failure, things like that. I work with a lot of women that are dealing with alcoholism that also, I'm going to talk about eating disorders a little bit, that also struggle with eating disorders. And one of the things that is said to me a lot is, I drink because it takes up calories And then I don't have to eat. And when I don't eat, then I can have my body change in a way that is acceptable so more people will like me. So a cycle, a mind cycle, essentially, where you start out with, I don't like myself, or I'm feeling insecure, or I'm uncomfortable. I want to relieve that by having a drink. Then you start replacing what you're eating maybe with, oh, well, I really wanted to have that thing, but I can not eat, save that up, and have a glass of wine instead. And then that becomes a cycle. Then all of a sudden you are drinking large quantities of alcohol, still insecure, uncomfortable, feeling less than, dealing with a lot of low self-worth and isolation. The alcohol gives you this false sense of security. It makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you have a place. It makes you feel like you fit in. A lot of times, excuse me, a lot of times what happens in our society is people by nature crave connection. Women especially crave connection. There are so many societal stigmas and judgments placed on women. You're being too dramatic. You shouldn't be doing this. You need to be doing this. Your body needs to look like this. You should smile more. Why do you have an attitude? All of these kinds of voices that cultivate this idea in a lot of women's heads that they will never be good enough. And that's just from a mental health perspective. If you take away the alcohol, then you're left with this feeling of insecurity, this feeling of worthlessness, this feeling of loss of hope. Drinking then takes away some of that. It also creates this false sense of connection, meaning you can be in a group of women out for happy hour, and you're having a drink and everybody's having a drink and you guys are laughing and everybody has their like pretty glasses in their hand. And I've been told by a few clients kind of telling similar stories where they have a moment where they're like, wow, I finally feel like I fit in. I finally feel understood. I finally feel like I have a place, and it's all attributed to alcohol. Women typically will drink because of anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, insecurity, having a hard time with feeling comfortable enough to express their emotions because they don't want to be looked at as being dramatic, wanting to fit in, wanting to fill some type of a void. In typical relationships, women are stigmatized a lot of times. It's like, if you express yourself too much, you're being dramatic, or if you say how you really feel or you set a boundary, you're being rude. If you stand up for yourself and say, I don't like that, or you say no to somebody that's trying to get you to do something that you don't want to do, then you're being petty, or there's something wrong with you because you're standing up for yourself. That's the culture that a lot of women, most women, grow up in. We have to stay in our lane. We have to do what we need to do, whatever that looks like. And we have to be good and proper and not disrespectful and mind our manners and work really hard but receive no compensation for it. There's all these rules, right? There's all these voices, these societal voices that go on in a woman's head constantly from a very, very young age. And then alcohol comes into play. And the first drink is, oh my goodness, I can finally breathe. oh my gosh, I feel like all of that stuff that's rattling around in my head quiets for a moment. And then that's what many women get addicted to. It's the alcohol, but it's what the alcohol can do. It's that feeling, this false sense of security that alcohol creates. There was had a discussion with, this is ironically, I had a discussion with a few clients last week, all women, all in early recovery. And one of the things that they were discussing was this idea of, if I don't have alcohol in a social setting with other women, I don't know how to communicate. I don't know how to fit in. I don't know how to talk. Alcohol was their main connection point. And that is proven even throughout what was just discussed previously with the slides, with those pictures. It's like women are valued based off of if they're drinking this pretty drink, or if they're out with it. I mean, Sex and the City, for example, that show, the main foundation of that show was them with martini glasses, all sitting around chatting, talking about life and feeling understood and happy and heard. But the way it's portrayed is it's all because of alcohol. So then women start to lose their identity even more, especially women in the throes of alcoholism. My role is, for example, my role is a mother. And therefore, I have all of these responsibilities as a mother to take care of my kids, take care of the house, make sure that everything is on the table, make sure everything looks presentable, make sure I look presentable, make sure my body looks good. All of these roles. Add in alcohol. And then it's okay, alcohol is the only way that I can get all of these things done. And if I don't have that, then I won't be able to get any of these things done. And therefore, I'm not good enough. You keep drinking, your tolerance builds up. And then your identity becomes the alcohol. Everything that you are, everything that you do is centered around drinking. And for women, especially women, a lot of women end up being isolated at a certain point throughout their alcoholism. It could start as a social thing with friends wanting to try to build connections. But even, especially during COVID, we were talking about during COVID, alcohol and women, it became, I have to do all of these things because now we can't leave the house, or the kids can't go to school, or I have no ability to have agency over myself because I'm stuck in this house. And therefore, I need to sit down and have a drink. Or I'm having a really rough day, so I'm going to grab a glass of wine. All of a sudden, this culture then is reinforced that alcohol is the answer. And when you have the disease of addiction, your mind works in extremes. So there is, I am very unhappy, or I am extremely happy, extremely excited. Everything's wonderful. And you kind of just circle back and forth when you have a substance added to it. For example, I worked with a woman at one point that we were having discussion on this person's identity. Who are you? And who do you think you are without alcohol? And one of the main staple points was that without alcohol, I'm miserable. And with alcohol, I'm still miserable, but I'm not as miserable as I would be without it. So I'll still have it. Regardless of the consequences, regardless of the bad things that will happen, I'm so attached to this identity that I've created with this drink that I'd rather have it and have bad things happen than not have it and feel the way that I do. That's typical a lot of times in pretty much an overarching theme of addiction itself. I feel as though I was thinking about, like, before we got onto this presentation, I was thinking about young girls and all of the expectations that lie on young girls. You know, like what I talked about before, what you have to look like, who you should be, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And if you think about it, young girls are getting told that the only way that they're good enough is if they are pretty or popular, societally pretty or popular, or they really excel at a sport, or they really excel at something in school. You're essentially groomed to feel like you're never going to be good enough from a very, very early age. And alcohol steps in, and alcohol ends up being this kind of relief, so to say, for a lot of women. But then if you're predisposed to the disease of addiction, you start to rely on the alcohol as the answer. That's the whole self-medicating part of addiction. You're self-medicating with some substance. In this case, women self-medicating with alcohol to feel good enough, to feel worth, to feel like they're capable. Because a lot of women have never felt as though they're capable on their own. There's always more that they could be doing. You can do better. You can look better. You can clean the house better. You can get a better job. There's always more that you can be doing. And essentially, our society says that women can never do enough. They always have to do more. There's like ads for like women and weight loss, and the ads will be like, you know, so and so lost, insert amount of pounds here, right? And then the spokesperson will come on and be like, and I'm still on my journey to continue losing weight. Like the thing that she did was not enough, and there still is always more. So women grow up in a culture where they always feel like they have to be doing more. They can never be enough. Alcohol comes in, and alcohol is like, well, let me give you a little reprieve from that. And that's when the want turns into a need, and the drinking becomes the importance. The drinking becomes the identity of the person. It's no longer okay to just be you. You have to be you with a drink in your hand. I didn't initially say this, but I'm a woman in long-term recovery, and my drug of choice was alcohol. I had a lot of drugs of choices, but my main drug of choice consistently was alcohol. And I think about this a lot, that the thing that I held on to for so long during my active addiction was that when I drank, I used to tell people it felt like I could finally breathe again. Like I was so suffocated by myself and society and expectations and never feeling good enough that alcohol gave me a reprieve. It gave me that feeling of, oh my goodness, I can take a breath. I finally feel okay, even if it's for this short period of time. But because I'm an alcoholic, that was never enough. So then I needed more and more and more and more, until the point where my body couldn't work the right way anymore, because I was so I was drowning, so to say, in the alcohol itself. So if I have to like surmise everything, if everybody watching can get one thing out of this, the biggest thing that I'll say is for women in general, life is challenging, period. There are messages that you're being told all over the place that you're not enough, that you won't be enough, that you always have to change yourself to fit into some type of mold. Alcohol looks really appealing because of the way that it's presented. If you know that you're susceptible to the disease of addiction, alcohol isn't going to placate anything. It's not going to make anything better. It's only going to give you a temporary solution. And that is what is dangerous. If you feel like you're never going to be enough and you take a drink and you say to yourself, oh my goodness, I finally feel like I'm okay for once, one drink isn't going to cut it, because our head is filled with all of these messages that we're never going to be enough in general. So alcohol is just providing that little temporary relief, and you're going to have to keep doing it to keep feeling that way. And then there's going to be negative consequences associated with that in your life. I just think it's really important to recognize what women are up against, period, without the alcohol, and then add in alcoholism and have that ability to be able to see that alcohol isn't the answer. It doesn't make anything better. It gives you a false sense of security. There's women specifically in regards to recovery, because I just wanted to cover this real fast. AA and NA both have women-specific meetings just for women. They actually have, there's some meetings that are for moms, and there's some women just overall for women. There's women's, Ethos has a women's trauma track for addiction. And there are also gender-specific tracks at certain treatment centers as well, because the needs of women are different than the needs of men. It is just, that is how it is. And typically women have overall, this isn't a cited statistic, it's my own statistic, but women in general present with a lot of co-occurring disorders and trauma specifically in general. So then add addiction on top of that, and it's just a lot to process and digest. And if you have to do that in a space in which you don't feel safe, it's really nice to have that specific setting where you can just sit amongst other women to be able to talk. So I do have those resources. I can send them to Kim. But yeah, thank you.
Oh, Liv, you're amazing. Thank you so much for that. That was beautiful. I really appreciate the focus that you have on women. That appreciate. And I want to talk with you more, and I'm looking forward to when we can have a group discussion here after we hear from Megan. But thank you, Liv. Beautiful job.
Sure.
Megan, and so, again, I'm so grateful when we have people, and Liv obviously just disclosed that she is a person in recovery. But for someone to come as someone who is not a clinician, who I know, Megan, you are working in the field these days, but I'm just so very grateful to you and others who come and share their story, because I know as a family member, it always helped me when I was, especially in the early days of my son's recovery, to hear another person talk, because it feels safer to kind of hear it from somebody that I didn't raise, that I can hear these things and process it in a different way. So thank you for being with us, and I'll let you have the floor. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. So my name's Megan. I've been sober from alcohol since 2010, but I have other substances in my story. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. I was born in the early 80s and I was adopted. So I already have an odd stacked against me right there. I found out that I was adopted when I was 5, and that kind of like changed my whole life without me even realizing it. I didn't know where I fit in. I grew up, my dad was an Episcopal priest. He was also a drug and alcohol counselor. I had no idea where I fit in. I just knew I the way I explain it now is I was like that warped puzzle piece that you try to sorry about that. I was that word puzzle piece that you try to fit in everywhere and it just doesn't fit completely. So I I grew up, I was moving around with my dad being a priest. I never could really find a good friend group. I was expected to be the good little church girl because my dad was the priest, and that just didn't fit right with me. Back in the 80s, it was normal for you to be at a family function during the holidays, and my mom would give me a little bit of wine. So it all really it all really started there. Then I got confirmed at church. I mean, I got my first Holy Communion at church, and I was having wine every Sunday. So my parents had box wine in the fridge, and I found myself like taking a little here and a little there. And then by the time I was 12, I was almost a full blown alcoholic. So now I'm trying to be a kid, fit the fit the stigma of what it's like to be a preacher's daughter, and still not understanding where I fit in anywhere. So I just drank and drank more, and this became my life. It it's really sad to like think about. The only way I knew how to deal with anything was to have alcohol, and when I had it, I was happier. I don't even remember. I just know that I fit in. I was able to talk to people. I was able to be me, but I wasn't my authentic self. But back then, I thought I was. So anyway, I struggled in school. I struggled at home, and I was able to use like being a teenage girl as the reason I'm acting out. But here it's because I'm an alcoholic and I'm hiding it. So now I'm in high school and I'm still drinking heavily. My dad passed away when I was 14, and I was able to use that excuse as to why I was acting the way I was acting, but it wasn't. It was because I was drinking. Um, I still struggled in high school. I would go to all the parties, and I was the party girl. I was the drinker. I was cool. So that's what everybody said. But now looking back, that wasn't cool. And I was really just trying to I was trying to fit in. And a lot of what Kim spoke about and Liv spoke about is about trying to fit in and trying to find who you are. And I never knew who I was. So I I got pregnant with my first child, and I managed to stay sober that whole pregnancy, and it was not a problem. Then I got pregnant. Right after that, I started drinking again because it was normal to go to the bar with your friends. And I'm over 21 at this point. So I was drinking, blackout drinking. Now I have a baby. And then I get pregnant again. And I ended up staying sober through that whole pregnancy. And as soon as I had my daughter, I was right back out drinking again. I didn't I didn't know how to not drink. Um, and then through this, other substances were coming into play. And anytime I would have a drink, I would start using the other substances. And so they became a problem as well. And my life was unmanageable. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to act. I mean, from the time I was 12 until 2010, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I didn't, I couldn't wake up without taking a drink. I couldn't go to bed without taking a drink. I couldn't, cook dinner without having a drink. And my life, my life was bad. I thought it was okay. And it wasn't. I had my two children taken away from me. And I, am evicted from apartments after apartments. I ended up right before I stopped drinking. I had lived above a bar, so it was easy access. My best friend was the bartender downstairs, so I would drink from the time the bar would open to the time I would black out. I would have to be carried back upstairs to my apartment, and I would wake up the next morning not knowing what happened. Through all of this, I had a lot of trauma. I had, you know, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse all through my drinking days and through my drinking years. And I say a lot of my trauma was self-inflicted because of the alcoholism and because I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know it was okay to ask for help. I thought I should know better. I should be able to kick this on my own. So I end up getting evicted from my apartment in September of 2010, and I moved upstairs to my friend's apartment who lived at the top of the apartment building. And I it's me, her, and her daughter who was 6. I had lost my kids at this point, hadn't seen them. So I'm living with her and I'm drinking very heavily. And I wake up one morning and I'm throwing up and it looks like coffee grinds. So I'm supposed to take her daughter to school and I call her and I'm like, I can't, I have to go to the hospital. There's something wrong. So she comes home from work, takes her daughter to school, takes me to the hospital, and they have to pump my stomach. And that's when everybody found out how sick I really was with the alcohol. So she was like, you can't do this anymore. You can't drink. You're going to kill yourself. And she's like, you can stay with me, but you have to quit drinking. So even though she drank not alcoholically, she drank, here and there. She poured all the alcohol down the drain. She told her parents, she was like, listen, if Megan comes over, don't have the alcohol out. Like, she's trying to get clean from alcohol. And so December 28th of 2010 was the last time I took a drink. My life did not change because I still had addiction. I still had trauma that I hadn't processed. I still had a lot going on. I had mental health, and for my whole life, it was they didn't know what it was. I kept getting told I had bipolar and schizophrenia and all types of different diagnoses. And a lot was also the alcohol and the other drugs that I was consuming. So in 2018, I had a real wake up call, and I ended up saying, I'm done. I have to do this. I have to get sober. I had bouts in jail, and I would go from jail to rehab, jail to rehab. And every time I would come out, I just I couldn't get it together. I wasn't taking care of myself, and I wasn't acknowledging that I had a problem, that I had mental health issues. You know, there's a big stigma on mental health, and especially like mental health in women. And so I didn't want, I played a lot into the stigma. Like I'm not supposed to be like this. Like it can't be like this. So I never took it seriously. And then in 2018 was the last time I ever touched a substance. My problem still followed with me because I was on probation, and I didn't obviously I didn't follow the rules. I didn't go to court, I didn't go to probation, so I had a warrant out for me. So in April 2019, I was picked up on that warrant. I went to jail. I was in jail for a month and a half, and then I went to rehab, and I went to rehab with 8 months sober. And I really got to get the full effect of rehab, and I took advantage of it, and I took advantage of my therapist and the therapy and the trauma work, that I never took advantage of in the past, even though I had been on trauma tracks. And I was in one of the rehabs I was in, it was trauma, and trauma. And it was just me and a bunch of other women who had a lot of trauma, and I never took advantage of it. But this time I did. And I was put on drug court in my county, and I was told, because I was looking at 7 years up in a state correctional facility, and I was told if I didn't complete drug court flawlessly, then I was going to be upstate for 7 years. And that was not an option for me. At this point, I had 3 kids now. In 2013, I had a daughter, and she was born addicted to drugs. And you would think that that would stop me from using, but I didn't. I continued to use even after everything. And her dad took her to Arizona when she was 3. So now she's down there. My other kids I hadn't seen for 13 years. And I'm on drug court, and I was told do it flawlessly or go upstate for 7 years. So I did what I had to do. And through that time, I was able to find my authentic self, find who I was, process a lot of the traumas that I never processed, as a child. Because for me, a lot stemmed back to when I was a kid, when I was little. With my dad being a priest, I saw a lot of death. I saw a lot of despair. And I held that for a really long time. But now, when I was in the recovery house, somebody said to me, "What's your purpose in life?" And it really took me back, because I had no idea what I wanted to do. But in the recovery house, I was helping a lot of women like find jobs, and now we're in COVID. So I'm helping them, do things to stay productive during COVID. And I decided I wanted to work in the recovery field. So I graduated drug court in 24 months, which was the minimum amount of time. I was the first one in my county to graduate in 24 months. I talked to my therapist, I talked to my probation officer, and I was like, I really want to help people in recovery, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to start. And I took the classes to be a certified recovery specialist, and I was certified as a certified recovery specialist and a certified family recovery specialist. I started my career at Crozier Hospital, and they were still on COVID protocols, so it was really hard, to begin there. Uh, they did a mass layoff. I felt defeated, and I found a job at Pennsylvania Recovery Center, and I have been there for almost 2 years, and it has been an amazing opportunity for me. I'm able to share my experience, strength, and hope with other men and women, and I'm able to help them in their journey of recovery. And I appreciate, Kim, you having me tonight. Sorry, I get a little nervous when I tell my story, but you know, it is possible, but don't mental health, I know it had been talked about and before, don't ignore it, because I used alcohol to mask my like my mental health issues, because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was going on. Um, I have anxiety a lot. But I work through it these days. I don't pick up a drink or pick up a substance to get me through the day. Um, I've learned my coping skills to help me to, talk to other people. I have a sponsor, and I talk to her. I sponsor other women, and it's been a beautiful, it's been a beautiful journey. I was afraid to get sober because I was afraid to find out who I really was. And I've learned to love that person today. And that's been the greatest gift of all. And now I have a relationship with my kids. I have full custody of my youngest one. I have two stepchildren, and I have a husband and who's supportive, and I'm able to be me. I'm able to be the real me, and I don't have to hang around with the wrong crowd just because I don't know where I fit in. I know where I fit in today. And I'm grateful to be where I am today.
Oh man, Megan, I can't thank you enough. That was so amazing. Wow. I'm honored to hear your story, and thank you for sharing it. If you're a nervous speaker, I don't know, man, you sure didn't seem like it. You did a great job. You hit so many important things, and I love that. Um, God, there's just so much of what you said. It's so interesting that you had 8 months of sobriety in rehab, I mean, that's a really interesting piece of it, right? That you had that time to fully detox and really be able to be more present probably than your previous attempts, right?
Absolutely. I had something, it to me, it was very traumatic. But I had promised my friend's daughter, or I had promised my friend that if anything happened to her, I would take care of her kids. And she ended up in jail. And so I was living with her mom and her kids, but I was getting high at the time. And her daughter had come upstairs, and I had used the last of my money to get my stuff. And her daughter came upstairs and was like, "I'm hungry." And I'm like, "All right, well, we'll go get you something to eat." And she's like, "There's nothing." And there was really absolutely nothing in the house. And I threw what I had in the toilet, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is my bottom. Like, this has to be the bottom of my bottom, is to leave a child hungry. I was like, no way. So that was it for me. And I'm grateful. I don't like how the situation played out, but I'm grateful that it happened.
I get it. Yeah. And you said you didn't know your authentic self. I think you're probably one of the most authentic people I've ever heard speak. I mean, the fact that you're so transparent and honest about your story is a gift to all of us. I'm really touched, and thank you so so much. Liv, do you have anything that you want to say after Gregory?
I'd like the amount of consistent self-reflection and motivation that you've had to go through and the challenges and the ups and downs that you've had to go through to come out on the other side and help people is truly incredible. Like it's one of those things in AA where they're like, you know, they talk about like a spiritual awakening. And I'm like, you've had like multiple spiritual awakenings, but I feel like your purpose has always been to help other people. You just never saw it.
Definitely. I love what I do now.
Mhm.
You know, it's not even a job to me. It's
Yeah.
just like in nature.
Love it. So one of the questions that came up ahead of time is a great one, and we touched on it a little bit, but the question was, what other types of meetings, online or in person, can women attend besides Alcoholics Anonymous? I mentioned earlier Smart Recovery, which is an evidence-based program. There's also Recovery Dharma, which is a Buddhist-based program. I don't know if Liz or Megan, if you have any others that, and of course, in addition to, I think they're asking specifically about mutual aid groups, but of course, we have all sorts of inpatient, outpatient treatment. Recovery housing, I think, is so important too. I think that's something that gets missed a lot. Just, Megan talked a lot about, like, you finally found your what lights you up, but you also have your fellowship and your people who you fit with, right? And I think that's something that can be so beautiful especially when we isolate in substance use. Then when people find that recovery to be with that fellowship and living in those circumstances is so beneficial. But are there any others that you can think of for women? And I know, Liv, you mentioned meetings specific to women.
Yeah, there's AA and NA meetings that are specific to women. If you like go online and just type in like NA meetings near me or AA meetings near me, typically they'll show like women
Filters.
only and that kind of a thing. Um, I know that some of the places like the Phoenix Center, which is like a well-known trauma center, has a few different trauma groups. I would have to find the specific, I have a flyer somewhere, but there are specific trauma groups that are like kind of like pay as much as you can kind of a thing. You don't have to pay anything, but they have ones that are specific, I believe. I'm not sure if they're for women specifically. I believe I saw that. I'd have to look, but I know that a lot of different treatment centers though have them. Uh, like Ethos has the women's trauma track kind of a thing. But I think AA and NA are the two that I typically know the most. I don't know if Dharma has any specific or I would have to look and see if it's specific to women. I think that theirs are both genders, but
Right.
I know AA and NA has the specifics.
Right. Yeah, and I know I mean, I myself have participated in some therapy groups that are for women only, and
Mhm.
things. So not related to alcohol use, but just other,
Yeah,
codependent disorders.
yeah.
But yeah, it could be there are many clinicians, I believe, who offer those. I think it's very helpful. And another advanced question was what to do or not to do with a loved one who is in recovery, especially during the holidays when there's a lot of drinking, during family and friend gatherings. And I have to tell you, I'm going to put it in the chat as soon as I pull it up here. But we had a program a couple of weeks ago called Navigating the Holidays, and we discussed exactly this. And we had like another clinician with us named Rick Shugart, who does a lot of family work. And then we also had a parent named Lisa, who was amazing. She did such a great job just talking about the challenges of being a parent with a son in early days of recovery, what it was like when he wasn't in recovery, what it was like around the holidays. So I'm going to share that recording of that program with you in the chat. But it is, and what we ended up talking so much about that night was alcohol. Even though we were covering all substances, alcohol is what is so pervasive this time of year, especially. So any thoughts that either of you want to share about these challenges this time of
I
year?
have I have something that has come up quite often as of recent, that I've had a lot of conversations with families about in regards to allowing the loved one, if this is somebody that is like a parent or a significant other, um, is allowing that person, the person in early recovery, to set whatever boundary is necessary. Um, a lot of times I'll create like plans with families for the holidays, whether that be having the person commit to going to a meeting on like Christmas Eve, or having the person reach out to a sober support during that time. But I even go as far to say to people, if there is a family gathering where there will be drinking, it is 100% okay and allowed for the person in early recovery to say, I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't think that it should ever be a hey, we're going to this family gathering for the holidays and a bunch of your family members are going to be drinking. Like, are you going to be okay? If the person says no, then you have to respect that. So the number one thing for me is respecting whatever the boundaries are in regards to the person in early recovery. And then another thing I would say is, if it is just, say, at your house and the person is in early recovery with drinking, really, what I hear all of the time from my clients is, I don't want to make everybody else feel bad because I can't drink. However, when I hear that, what I hear is, I'm really uncomfortable in a place where people are drinking, but I'm too scared to say something. So I'm just going to be uncomfortable while I'm there and get triggered, but I'm not going to say anything to anybody. So I tell people, if there is an option to not have alcohol there, do not have alcohol there. Most likely a person in early recovery is going to have a really hard time standing up for themselves because they're already dealing with their own self-criticism and stigma and judgment that they're placing on themselves. So I think as a family member, your responsibility really is to listen to the person in early recovery and accept whatever the boundary is and do what you can to provide the safest environment that you can.
Yeah, love it. And I also love the suggestion of, if you're feeling at all vulnerable as a person in recovery, to bring a sober friend with you. If you're going to be someplace where you're feeling vulnerable, this comes up with like going to a wedding, right? Like anywhere where there's going to be a lot of drinking, or a sporting event or something like that, to have a sober friend, somebody who has your back, somebody you can take a break with, who's going to totally get it, and you support each other. I think that's always a great idea. Megan, go ahead.
I know for me, so my wedding, weddings, obviously there's alcohol there. Mine was sober wedding. We did, I said, no, I don't feel comfortable having alcohol there. Also, I used to coach Little League, and they would have beef and beers. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm in recovery and I'm not comfortable surrounding myself around a bunch of people drinking and alcohol. So, I've also had my in-laws ask me, and they're like, hey, do you feel comfortable with, there might be alcohol down at the shore house. Are you comfortable with that? Now I can say, yeah, that's fine. I don't, it doesn't bother me. But in early recovery, I would have probably said, maybe not, or, not going around it. So it really is like based on how your loved one is, or how the person in recovery feels. Because there may be certain situations, again, I was just talking about this today at work. Holidays and relapse is a big, huge thing. So, I always say take precaution. It doesn't matter if your family members understand that you're in early recovery, they'll understand if you have to say, I'm not comfortable, or I need to do this instead, or if you need to walk away, if it's the holiday and you need to say, well, I need to go to a meeting, be okay with your family member in recovery going to a meeting, because it's important and they're expressing their needs. So absolutely, just if you're in recovery, set your boundary. Don't be ashamed. And if you are the family member of someone in recovery, just know if they say I need to go to a meeting, it's all right. Just let them go.
I love it. Yeah. And also just letting go of all expectations that this, holiday is going to look like all the other ones, or it's going to be Norman Rockwell, because, if we set that up and they feel any pressure to that, and, because I remember having this discussion with some families, like, when my son, the first Thanksgiving that he was sober, he was deep frying a turkey with a bunch of dudes in the Poconos, and he was having a blast. I think he had way more fun than he would have had with us. And like I had to just let that go. Like he's not going to be with us for Thanksgiving. He's doing great. Like I'm so happy for him. So we, you know, and it changes as our lives evolve and our kids grow up and families change and so forth. It's going to look different anyway. So kind of we not kind of need to get used to that idea that it's going to be a little different. But you know that sometimes the very best place for, you know, most often the best place for a sober person is with other sober people, you know. So yeah, we just need to kind of let go of some of this.
I was gonna say one more thing in regards
Mhm.
to the because it's women and alcoholism. I was
Mhm.
thinking to myself, if you have a loved one that is in recovery or working towards recovery or wherever they're at in their journey, and your house is typically the house that hosts, any added pressure put on a person in early recovery is going to feel it's almost going to feel like it's insurmountable. And I think that that's another place where a lot of people struggle with asking for support is, hey, holidays are stressful, period. Holidays in recovery are even more stressful. Holidays in recovery, having to try to host people and or get everything together and or have people at their house adds another layer of stress on it. So I think it's like the question becomes, what can I do as a loved one if I'm a loved one talking to somebody in recovery? What can I do to support you best? How are you going to feel safest? Don't worry about me getting angry about any decision that you need to make for your own safety, and making sure that that person feels completely supported without any judgment attached.
Excellent point. Thank you. Thanks for that, Liv. Really good. We have a few minutes left. Does anyone, I didn't see any other questions in the chat, but please feel free to drop something in the chat or unmute and ask your question. Well, I'm not seeing anything. I really want to thank you all so very much. I'm going to put everything back in the chat that I did before, so you have it handy. Also includes the survey that will also come up at the end of the program. Thank you for that comment there, LBB. Appreciate it. Yes, thank you both. Thank you, Liv and Megan, and thank you all for being with us. I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday. And again, much gratitude to Liv and Megan for sharing tonight and being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Thank